She walked through the crowded streets, unnoticed, as if she was invisible. People passed by without a second glance, their minds occupied with their own lives. Even in school, she often felt like a shadow, drifting along the edges, never quite part of the main story. Her classmates talked, laughed, and made plans, but she was never really included. Invitations to group projects or parties rarely reached her, and when they did, she felt the familiar sting of awkwardness and self-doubt. She learned to keep to herself, to watch quietly, and to dream silently. Her small room was her sanctuary. Behind a closed door, she could let go of the invisible cloak she wore in the outside world. The walls were bare except for a few posters of musicians who inspired her, and a small, worn-out keyboard sat in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and it allowed her to create a world where she mattered. She spent hours playing melodies and experimenting with notes, losing herself in the music. The sound made her feel alive, confident, and seen, even if only by herself. Her family noticed her passion but did not fully understand it. They encouraged her to study hard, to focus on practical things, and sometimes gently reminded her that music might not be a real career. She didn't mind. She knew they meant well. She had learned to live in two worlds, one where she kept her dreams safe, and one where she navigated the indifference of daily life. She practiced quietly, humming softly when no one was around, sometimes staying up late into the night just to get the notes right. Her fingers moved across the keys as if they had a mind of their own, carrying her worries and hopes with every chord. School was a challenge in its own way. Teachers sometimes overlooked her, calling on more outspoken students during class. She would quietly raise her hand, hoping to be noticed, but often the opportunity would pass. It wasn't that she wasn't smart or capable. She was simply quiet, and quietness often went unseen. Lunchtime was the hardest. She would sit at a corner table, eating her lunch alone while others formed groups and shared stories. Sometimes, she tried to join conversations, but her words seemed to vanish into the background noise. She began to accept the loneliness, telling herself that it was safer that way. But deep down, a part of her longed to be recognized, to have someone truly see her talent and passion. Her life outside school was no different. In her neighborhood, she wandered through parks and streets, often unnoticed. Children played together, neighbors chatted, and adults went about their routines, but she remained on the periphery. She carried a small notebook everywhere, jotting down ideas for melodies or lyrics, sketching notes, and writing down the things she felt but could not say out loud. This notebook became her confidant, a place where she could pour out her dreams and frustrations without fear of judgment. There was a gentle sadness to her days, a quiet ache that no one seemed to notice. Sometimes, when the world felt too loud, she would escape to a nearby park. Sitting under the shade of a tree, she would close her eyes and imagine herself performing in front of a crowd, people listening, smiling, and applauding her. In her mind, she felt the thrill of recognition, the warmth of connection, and the joy of being appreciated. These daydreams were fleeting but precious, keeping her spirit alive. Her music was not just a hobby, it was a lifeline. When she played, she could express emotions that words could not capture. Joy, sadness, hope, and fear all flowed through her fingertips, shaping melodies that seemed to tell her story better than she ever could. Her room would fill with sound, and for a moment, the world outside disappeared. She could almost believe that if she played well enough, the world would finally take notice. It was a comforting thought, one that gave her courage to keep going despite the indifference she faced every day. She had tried small moments of courage before. A few times, she had sung softly during school events or tried to join music clubs, but her attempts went largely unnoticed. Some students whispered or giggled, while others simply ignored her presence. Each time, she felt a mix of embarrassment and determination. She refused to give up entirely, believing that one day, she might have a chance to show her true self. Each setback only fueled her resolve, reminding her that the path to being seen was not easy, but worth pursuing. Her relationship with her family was tender but distant. They admired her discipline and focus but often couldn't grasp the depth of her emotional connection to music. She longed for someone to share her excitement with, someone to say, "I see you, and your music is beautiful." Her younger sibling occasionally asked her to play, clapping along with glee, and those brief moments of recognition were precious treasures she held close to her heart. Even these small acknowledgments made her believe that someday, a larger audience might also hear and appreciate her talent. One evening, she stayed up late, practicing a new piece she had been working on for weeks. Her fingers stumbled over a tricky section repeatedly, and frustration bubbled inside her. She took a deep breath and started again, this time slower, letting each note resonate. By the end, the piece sounded beautiful, a reflection of her patience and persistence. She smiled to herself, feeling a quiet pride that no one else would know. In these moments, she realized that her music was not just about being seen. It was about expressing who she truly was, even if the world remained unaware. Despite her solitary life, she remained hopeful. She observed others around her, noticing small acts of kindness, moments of laughter, and the way people connected. These observations gave her ideas for songs, melodies that captured human emotions in ways words could not. She imagined performing for people who had never paid attention to her, seeing their faces light up as they listened. It was a distant dream, but it kept her motivated, driving her to practice, improve, and prepare for a moment that might one day come. Her world was small but rich with imagination and feeling. The quiet streets, the empty classrooms, and her little room filled with music were all parts of a life that, though overlooked by many, was vibrant in her heart. She learned to cherish the private victories, the perfect notes played in solitude, and the emotions captured in her melodies. Each day, she held on to the belief that one day, the world would notice her, and she would step out of the shadows into the light, carrying her music with her. And so, she continued quietly, diligently, and with hope. She walked unnoticed, laughed quietly at her own jokes, and played her music alone. But in every note, she told her story. She was invisible to the world, but visible to herself, and that visibility was enough to keep her moving forward. She knew that being ignored did not mean she was unworthy. Somewhere, someday, the right moment would come, and when it did, she would be ready. The music inside her was waiting, patient and persistent, just like her. And in that waiting, she found strength, determination, and the quiet courage to dream on. The announcement came on a chilly morning, echoing through the hallways of the community center and bouncing around the school corridors. A talent show was being organized, inviting anyone with a skill to come forward and perform. The words floated in the air like an invitation, and for a moment, she froze. Her heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. She had dreamed of performing, of finally letting the world hear her music, but the thought of stepping onto a stage filled her with dread. Would anyone notice her? Would they laugh or ignore her? Just like always, her friends were quick to react. Some of them laughed at the idea, teasing her gently but not cruelly. Others didn't take her seriously, assuming she would never actually enter. The whispers and doubts of those around her were enough to make her pause. But deep inside, the small spark of courage that had survived years of being ignored flickered to life. She thought about all the hours she had spent practicing in her room, the melodies she had nurtured like fragile flowers, and the feeling of joy that came when she played perfectly. Maybe this was the moment she had been waiting for. For several days, she weighed the decision carefully. Every time she considered signing up, fear gripped her chest. She imagined the crowded room, people talking and laughing while she tried to sing or play her music. The thought made her want to hide under her blanket and pretend she had never heard of the talent show. Yet, each time, she returned to her music, remembering how alive she felt when she played. It wasn't just about being seen. It was about letting the music exist outside of her quiet room. One evening, after school had ended and the hallways were empty, she found herself standing in front of the sign-up sheet. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pen. She imagined writing her name and seeing it in black ink on the paper. Felt like crossing a bridge into a new world. With a deep breath, She finally wrote her name down, committing herself to the stage and to the unknown audience that awaited her. The action, though small, was monumental. For the first time in her life, she publicly declared that she would not remain invisible. From that moment, preparation became her new world. Every day after school, she would rush home, eat a quick snack, and settle at her keyboard. She played for hours, perfecting each note, adjusting the tempo, and experimenting with new arrangements. She recorded herself on her phone, listening critically, learning what sounded right and what needed improvement. She watched videos of performers online, studying their posture, expressions, and timing, learning how to convey emotion beyond the notes themselves. Her room, once a place of private solace, became a rehearsal studio where determination and creativity thrived. Despite her focus, anxiety lingered. Some nights, she lay awake, imagining the talent show in vivid detail. She pictured the audience whispering and staring at her with indifference, or worse, laughing. Her stomach twisted at the thought, but she reminded herself that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was stepping forward in spite of it. She repeated this mantra, whispering it to herself until it became a shield against doubt. Each time she played and heard her music resonate, her confidence grew just a little more. Her family noticed a change in her. They saw the dedication, the late nights, and the seriousness in her eyes. Her younger sibling occasionally peeked into her room, asking about her music, and she would smile, happy to share small snippets. These little interactions, simple as they were, became treasures to her, small validations that her effort mattered. Her parents, though not fully understanding her dream, supported her decision to enter the show. They reminded her to enjoy the experience and assured her that it was okay to feel nervous. Their encouragement, gentle but steady, gave her a sense of stability as she prepared for what lay ahead. Days passed quickly, and soon the talent show drew near. The community center buzzed with excitement, and she could feel the energy even from the quiet corners of her room. She watched others sign up, some confident, some shy, and felt a mix of admiration and fear. She was surrounded by talent, and the thought of being compared to others made her heart pound. But she reminded herself that she was not competing with anyone. She was sharing a part of herself that had been hidden for too long. As the day approached, she started rehearsing in new ways. She practiced standing while playing, imagining herself on stage. She worked on her expressions, the way her hands moved, the way her body conveyed emotion. It was unfamiliar and uncomfortable, but each practice made her feel more prepared. She recorded herself again, watching and listening, learning not just the music but how to present it. The rehearsal was not perfect, but it was real, and she was beginning to believe that she could step onto the stage and give her best performance. Friends and classmates remained largely unaware of her plans. Some teased lightly, thinking she would never go through with it, while others were too busy with their own lives to notice. This invisibility, which had once felt like a burden, now gave her freedom. She could focus entirely on her music without worrying about others' expectations. She found joy in the secret dedication, a private sense of accomplishment that no one could take away. Yet, beneath the calm, a small flutter of excitement began to grow. The possibility of being noticed, of finally sharing her talent with an audience, was thrilling. The night before the talent show, she stayed up late practicing a new arrangement she had created. Her fingers flew across the keys, and she sang softly, experimenting with the flow and emotion. The music filled her room, and she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She paused, listening to the echo of the last note, and felt a sense of pride. This was her work, her creation, and she was ready to share it. She allowed herself a small smile, a rare moment of self-recognition and satisfaction. She knew that the next day would be challenging, but she also knew she had done everything she could to prepare. Sleep came late and uneasy. Dreams swirled with images of the audience, the bright lights, and the possibility of failure. She woke early, heart racing, and went over her performance in her mind. Each step, each note, each expression was rehearsed again and again. She reminded herself to breathe, to focus, and to let the music flow naturally. The day had arrived, and with it, a mix of fear and anticipation that made her feel more alive than ever. As she got ready and made her way to the community center, the reality of the situation set in. The streets were filled with people, and the chatter of the crowd was loud and intimidating. She held her sheet music close, feeling the weight of her preparation and the hope that her music could reach the audience. Each step toward the stage felt monumental. She felt the familiar sting of invisibility, but she refused to let it define her. Today was different. Today she would be seen, at least for a moment, and that thought gave her courage. She arrived at the venue early, observing the room and the other performers. Some were confident and chatty, while others, like her, seemed nervous and unsure. She found a quiet corner to warm up, practicing scales and humming softly. Her hands trembled slightly, but she focused on the familiar sensation of the keys beneath her fingers. The room felt larger than she imagined, and the audience seemed endless. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself, and reminded herself that she was ready. The music inside her was prepared, and it was time to let it out. The moment was approaching. She was called to step forward, and with each step, her heartbeat accelerated. The audience seemed to blur at first, but she focused on the music, on the melody she had practiced for weeks. She placed her hands on the keyboard, took a deep breath, and began. The first notes flowed carefully, hesitantly at first, but then with growing confidence. Each chord resonated, filling the room with the sound that had lived only in her room until now. She felt the music take over, guiding her through the performance, and for the first time, she noticed the eyes of the audience turning toward her, focused and attentive. And in that moment, the invisible girl began to step into a world where she could be seen. Every hour of practice, every quiet moment spent dreaming in her room, led to this one opportunity. She knew the journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken. The stage was not just a place. It was a bridge from silence to expression, from invisibility to recognition, and she was ready to cross it. The lights were bright and slightly blinding as she stepped onto the stage. The room was filled with people, some chatting quietly, some scanning their phones, and others whispering among themselves. She felt her heart hammering against her chest, and her hands shook slightly as she approached the keyboard. For a moment, she considered stepping back, retreating to the safety of the quiet corner she had left behind. But then she remembered the hours of practice, the silent determination that had carried her through years of being ignored, and she knew she could not turn back. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. Her eyes scanned the audience quickly. Most faces were unfamiliar, strangers who had no idea who she was. A few people looked mildly curious, while others seemed distracted, chatting or shifting in their seats. The indifference she had grown so used to in her daily life now surrounded her in a tangible, almost physical way. It would have been easy to crumble, to let the fear consume her, but she reminded herself that she had already done the hardest part, showing up. She sat down at the keyboard, her fingers hovering over the keys. The silence of anticipation pressed down on her, heavier than any audience she had imagined in her dreams. She closed her eyes for a moment and pictured her small room, the place where her music had been alive and safe. She thought of the countless nights spent perfecting each note, of the melodies that had become companions in her solitude. And then, slowly, she let her fingers fall on the keys, letting the first notes escape into the room. At first, her playing was cautious, careful, almost timid. She could hear the faint murmurs in the audience, whispers that seemed to question whether she truly belonged there. But as she continued, the music began to flow more naturally. The melody rose and fell, carrying emotion that words could not capture. Her fingers moved with a confidence she had never shown anyone, and a strange sense of calm washed over her. For the first time, she was not playing for herself alone. She was playing for anyone willing to listen. The room gradually fell quiet. The chatter faded, replaced by a stillness that seemed to amplify every note. People who had been distracted stopped, turning their attention to the small figure at the keyboard. Eyes widened, eyebrows lifted, and a few mouths opened slightly in surprise. The music was different from anything they had expected from someone they had barely noticed before. It was confident, emotional, and raw. It told a story that no one had heard before. A story of quiet determination and hidden talent. Her confidence grew with each passing measure. She played with expression, allowing her emotions to seep into the melody. The piece swelled at times, softening at others, creating a journey that carried the audience along. She could feel the energy of the room changing, the subtle shift from indifference to attention. It was a delicate, thrilling transformation, and she reveled in it quietly. The music was a bridge, connecting her to people who had never looked her way, and she could sense the impact it was having. For a moment, she allowed herself to look at the audience. Faces once blank or distracted now showed signs of engagement. Some leaned forward, listening intently. A few were nodding subtly, lost in the rhythm and emotion. The realization struck her. She had their attention. The invisible walls that had separated her from the world were beginning to crumble, replaced by connection. The thrill of recognition was intoxicating, but she kept her focus, letting the music guide her. Her nerves did not disappear entirely. Occasionally, a flicker of fear crossed her mind, a reminder of the vulnerability of standing before strangers. But she met each doubt with determination. She remembered the late nights, the hours spent rehearsing alone, and the dreams she had nurtured quietly for years. This was her moment, the culmination of patience, practice, and quiet courage. Each note was a declaration that she existed, that her voice mattered, and that she would not be ignored. As the performance continued, the audience's response became more apparent. Murmurs of surprise turned into smiles, some heads nodded rhythmically, and a few people even whispered to the person next to them, their voices filled with admiration. The music carried not just sound, but emotion, connecting hearts without words. She could sense the change, the shift from passive spectators to engaged listeners. It was a powerful feeling, one she had never experienced before. The realization that she was finally being heard filled her with a quiet joy. She allowed herself to be completely absorbed in the music, losing track of time and space. Her body moved subtly with the rhythm, her expressions matching the ebb and flow of the melody. The piece she had chosen was one she had composed herself, a reflection of her inner world. Each note carried a fragment of her story, a piece of the years she had spent hidden, overlooked, and underestimated. And now, in the bright lights of the stage, those fragments were shared with the world, visible and undeniable. By the time she reached the climax of her piece, the room was entirely silent. Every person present seemed to be holding their breath, caught in the spell of her music. She felt a sense of exhilaration mixed with vulnerability, knowing that she was exposing herself in a way she never had before. Yet, instead of fear, she felt strength. The music had become a shield and a voice, conveying what words could not. She realized that this was the power she had always known it held, a force that could transform perception and connect people. As the final notes faded into the quiet, a brief, stunned silence followed. The audience seemed momentarily unsure how to respond, as if recovering from the unexpected beauty they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. It started as polite claps, hesitant at first, but quickly grew louder and more enthusiastic. People were standing, cheering, and some even whistled, unable to contain their admiration. The energy in the room was electric, a stark contrast to the indifference that had greeted her at the start. For the first time, she felt the power of recognition and appreciation. She sat for a moment, breathing heavily, letting the sound of the applause wash over her. Her cheeks were flushed, her heart still racing, but a smile spread across her face. The invisible weight she had carried for years seemed lighter, replaced by a sense of accomplishment and validation. The audience had seen her, really seen her, and responded with genuine admiration. It was more than she had dared to imagine, and it felt both surreal and deeply satisfying. People approached her after the performance, offering compliments and words of encouragement. Some asked how long she had been practicing, others expressed surprise at her talent, and a few admitted they had underestimated her. The shy girl who had walked unnoticed through life was now the center of attention, not because she sought it, but because her talent demanded acknowledgement. She listened to the praise quietly, absorbing each word, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. The experience changed her perspective profoundly. She realized that her years of quiet dedication had prepared her for this moment, and that perseverance and self-belief could overcome indifference. The applause, the smiles, and the recognition were external confirmations of what she had always known internally. Her music mattered, and so did she. The invisible barriers that had kept her hidden were no longer impenetrable. She had found a way through them. After the show, she walked home slowly, replaying the performance in her mind. The streets seemed different now, brighter somehow, as if reflecting the change within her. She carried a sense of accomplishment and confidence that would stay with her long after the applause faded. The experience had not only proven her ability to others, but also to herself, reinforcing the belief that courage and dedication could create opportunities, even for someone who had long been overlooked. That night, she returned to her room, still buzzing with emotion. She sat at her keyboard and played quietly, this time for herself, savoring the joy and fulfillment that came from sharing her music. The journey was far from over, and many challenges remained ahead, but she had crossed an important threshold. She had stepped out of invisibility and allowed her talent to shine. The music, which had always been her private companion, now had the power to connect, inspire, and be recognized. And in that realization, she found a deep and lasting sense of happiness and purpose. The applause continued to grow, filling the room with a warmth she had never experienced before. The initial polite claps had transformed into genuine admiration, and the crowd began to stand, some clapping loudly, some whistling, all showing their appreciation. She felt her heart swell with a mixture of pride, disbelief, and joy. After years of being ignored, overlooked, and underestimated, this was the recognition she had quietly dreamed of. The invisible walls that had separated her from the world seemed to be crumbling with every cheer, every smile, every nod of approval. People who had never noticed her before were now talking about her in hushed, amazed tones. Some students whispered to each other, exchanging looks of surprise and newfound respect. Adults in the audience, some of whom had been skeptical or dismissive, now approached her with questions about how long she had been practicing, what inspired her music, and where she had learned such skill. Every word of praise, every acknowledgement, felt like a validation of the years she had spent in quiet dedication, and it warmed her in a way she had never expected. She felt a strange mix of humility and exhilaration. She had worked for years in private, honing her talent without the expectation of applause or recognition. Now all that effort was visible, tangible, and appreciated. It was not just about the performance itself. It was about being seen for who she was, about having her dedication, creativity, and perseverance acknowledged. For the first time, she understood that her quiet life had not been in vain. The music she had nurtured in solitude was powerful, capable of touching people and changing the way they saw her. As the applause settled, she noticed a few faces in the crowd that seemed particularly moved. A young student smiled with admiration, perhaps seeing in her a reflection of their own hidden dreams. An older woman wiped her eyes, overcome by the beauty and emotion of the performance. Some clapped again, not because they had to, but because they genuinely wanted to show their appreciation. Each reaction was a reminder that her music could reach people, that it had the power to connect and inspire. After the performance, people approached her one by one. Some offered compliments and words of encouragement. Others asked to hear more of her music. She listened quietly, absorbing each comment, each smile, each nod of recognition. For so long, she had been invisible, and now she was being celebrated, not for being someone else, but for being herself. Her talent, her dedication, and her courage had made an impact, and she felt a deep, satisfying sense of fulfillment. The feeling was intoxicating, but it was also grounding. She realized that recognition was not something to chase blindly. It was a byproduct of sincerity, hard work, and passion. In the days that followed, her life began to change subtly but meaningfully. People who had ignored her before now looked at her differently. Teachers acknowledged her skills and encouraged her to continue performing. Classmates who had been indifferent now approached her, asking about her music and expressing admiration. Even neighbors who had never paid attention to her seemed curious and impressed. It was a strange, almost surreal shift, but one that reinforced her belief in perseverance and self-confidence. She had stepped out of the shadows, and the world had responded. She began receiving invitations to perform at small events, gatherings, and local celebrations. Each opportunity was a chance to share her music with new audiences, to continue building confidence, and to strengthen the connection between her and the people around her. She approached each invitation with a mix of excitement and nervousness, knowing that the first step had been the hardest. Once she had faced the stage and astonished one audience, the next performances seemed less intimidating, and she began to embrace the challenge. Her family, who had quietly supported her all along, felt a new sense of pride. They had seen her grow in ways that were invisible to most, and now the world was beginning to catch up. They encouraged her, accompanied her to performances, and celebrated each achievement, no matter how small. Their support became a foundation, giving her strength to continue pursuing her passion. She realized that recognition from others was important, but the encouragement of those who loved her was even more meaningful. It reminded her that she was valued not just for her talent, but for who she was. Her music, once a private sanctuary, now had a public life. She experimented with new compositions, explored different styles, and refined her performances. Each practice session, each new melody, was infused with the experience of having been seen and appreciated. The audience's astonishment had taught her that her voice mattered, that her creativity could touch others, and that perseverance could overcome years of neglect. It was a powerful lesson, one that would shape her future in ways she had only begun to imagine. The confidence she gained from the talent show began to influence other areas of her life. In school, she became more willing to speak up, to participate, and to share ideas. She discovered that being noticed in one area of life could ripple outward, changing her interactions, her relationships, and her sense of self. The shy, quiet girl who had once faded into the background was learning to assert herself, not aggressively, but with quiet assurance and self-respect. Each small victory reinforced her belief that she deserved to be heard and seen. As her performances continued, she developed a deeper understanding of the connection between music and emotion. She realized that her ability to convey feelings through melodies was a unique gift, one that could inspire, comfort, and uplift others. The astonishment she had first witnessed in the audience was not just a reaction to skill, but a response to authenticity and expression. She began to see her music not only as a personal outlet, but as a means of reaching others, touching lives in subtle and profound ways. The journey was not without challenges. Some audiences were skeptical, some performances did not go as planned, and self-doubt occasionally crept in. Yet, she faced each obstacle with resilience. She had learned that recognition and success were not guaranteed, but that effort, dedication, and authenticity could create opportunities and open doors. Each experience, whether perfect or flawed, contributed to her growth and confidence. She began to embrace imperfection, understanding that it was part of the human experience and part of her story. Her relationship with her peers and community continued to evolve. People who had once overlooked her now sought her advice, asked about her process, and included her in conversations about music and creativity. She noticed that respect was not demanded but earned, and that genuine passion and persistence could change perceptions. The astonishment of the audience had been a turning point, but the ongoing interactions and connections solidified her place in a world that had once ignored her. Through it all, she remained grounded. She never forgot the years of solitude, the hours spent practicing in her room, and the moments of doubt and fear. Those experiences had shaped her, instilling patience, humility, and empathy. They reminded her that recognition was valuable, but the internal satisfaction of pursuing one's passion was even more important. She carried this balance with her, allowing the applause to inspire without defining her worth. As time passed, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The shy, overlooked girl who had once wandered through life unnoticed had transformed through courage, dedication, and talent. She had stepped onto a stage, faced fear, and astonished a crowd. In doing so, she had discovered not only her own potential but also the power of persistence, self-belief, and authentic expression. The experience had changed her, opening doors, connecting hearts, and instilling a lasting sense of confidence. Her story was no longer just her own. It was a shared experience, witnessed by the audience and reflected in their astonishment and admiration. She had bridged the gap between invisibility and recognition, showing that even those who are overlooked can create impact, inspire others, and achieve their dreams. The journey was ongoing, with new challenges and opportunities awaiting, but the lessons she had learned would guide her forward, reminding her of the strength within herself and the joy of being truly seen. In the weeks following the talent show, her life began to feel different, almost surreal. She walked through the familiar streets, but the world seemed to notice her in a new way. People she had passed countless times stopped to compliment her performance, to ask about her music, or simply to smile with recognition. The quiet girl who had once faded into the background was no longer invisible. She felt a gentle shift in how she moved through her environment, a sense of belonging and acceptance that had been missing for years. Every acknowledgement, no matter how small, reminded her that courage and perseverance could create real change. She continued practicing diligently, but now her motivation carried a new depth. She was no longer playing solely for herself. She had an audience, real people who listened, appreciated, and responded to her music. Each performance, whether in small gatherings, school events, or local community functions, became an opportunity to grow, to refine her skill, and to share her emotions with the world. The applause, smiles, and astonished expressions she had first received at the talent show became fuel for her passion. She discovered that performing was not just about talent, but also about connection, creating moments that lingered in the hearts of those who listened. Her family watched with pride and subtle awe as she embraced this new chapter of her life. They had always supported her from the sidelines, offering gentle encouragement, but now they saw. In her quiet moments, she reflected on how much had changed in her life. The shy, overlooked girl who had spent hours practicing alone had transformed into someone capable of commanding attention, connecting with others, and expressing herself boldly. Yet, despite the attention and recognition, she remained grounded. She never forgot the solitary nights of practice, the quiet afternoons of dreaming in her room, or the feelings of doubt and invisibility that had shaped her journey. Those experiences remained a part of her, a reminder of where she had come from and why her determination mattered. With each new opportunity to perform, she embraced the challenge with excitement and mindfulness. She experimented with new compositions, incorporated subtle nuances she had never tried before, and refined her delivery. The feedback from audiences, both small and large, became a mirror that reflected her growth. She began to understand more deeply the power of music, not just as a personal expression, but as a language that could inspire, console, and unite people. Every note she played was a bridge, a connection between her inner world and the hearts of those who listened. The recognition she received also gave her a new perspective on life outside of music. She became more confident in her interactions, more willing to share ideas, and more assertive in situations that would have once intimidated her. The courage she had discovered on stage extended into classrooms, social interactions, and personal challenges. She realized that stepping out of invisibility in one area of life had ripple effects in others, allowing her to engage more fully, speak with more clarity, and assert herself with gentle confidence. The invisible barriers that had held her back were no longer insurmountable. She had the tools to navigate the world with both skill and grace. Her peers began to respect and admire her not only for her talent, but also for her authenticity and dedication. People who had overlooked her began to seek her out for advice, to share their own interests, and to include her in conversations and activities that she had once been excluded from. She learned that recognition, when earned through sincerity and effort, created opportunities for genuine connection. The astonishment she had inspired in the audience of the talent show had opened doors, but it was the ongoing consistency of her dedication that solidified her place in the world around her. As time passed, she also reflected on the importance of humility and gratitude. She never took the applause or recognition for granted. Each performance was approached with care, each note played with intention, and each interaction with an audience or peer treated as an opportunity to connect authentically. She understood that talent alone was not enough. The ability to listen, to empathize, and to share was equally important. Her music had become more than a personal sanctuary. It was a way to engage, inspire, and contribute positively to the lives of others. She continued to dream as she had always done, but her dreams were no longer solitary. She imagined larger stages, new compositions, and collaborations with other musicians. Yet she also remained grounded in the small victories, the moments of quiet joy that came from sharing a melody with a single person who truly listened. The balance between ambition and presence became her guiding principle, allowing her to pursue growth without losing sight of the simple pleasures that had fueled her passion from the beginning. Her journey also taught her resilience. She learned that fear and doubt were natural companions in any endeavor, but they could be managed through preparation, practice, and self-belief. She recalled the nights spent rehearsing alone, the moments of hesitation before signing up for the talent show, and the tremors of nerves before stepping onto the stage. Each challenge she faced became a lesson in perseverance, reminding her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. Through her experiences, she discovered a profound sense of purpose. Music had always been a personal escape, a way to express herself when words were not enough. Now it had become a tool for connection, empowerment, and inspiration. She realized that sharing her gift could have a meaningful impact on others, encouraging them to pursue their own passions and to believe in themselves. Her story, once invisible, now carried weight and meaning, demonstrating that persistence, dedication, and authenticity could transform lives. Her growth was evident not just in her music, but in her confidence, relationships, and outlook on life. She approached challenges with a quiet determination, embraced opportunities with enthusiasm, and nurtured connections with care. The shy, overlooked girl had evolved into someone capable of navigating the world with poise, resilience, and a deep appreciation for both her own journey and the journeys of those around her. Every performance, every interaction, and every moment of reflection reinforced the understanding that recognition, when paired with authenticity, created lasting impact. She also found joy in mentoring and encouraging others. Younger students, shy and uncertain, often approached her for advice or guidance. She shared her experiences, emphasizing the importance of practice, perseverance, and courage. She reminded them that being overlooked did not define their worth and that every small effort contributed to eventual growth. The satisfaction she derived from helping others was immense, adding a new layer of purpose to her own journey. She realized that her music was not only a voice for herself but a source of inspiration for those who needed it most. Looking back, she understood that the journey from invisibility to recognition had been gradual, shaped by small, consistent steps rather than a single defining moment. Each hour of practice, each act of courage, and each moment of self-belief had accumulated into the success she now experienced. She appreciated the lessons learned along the way, understanding that setbacks, doubts, and challenges were integral to growth. The astonishment of the talent show audience had been a milestone, but the ongoing commitment to her craft and her self-expression defined her transformation. In the end, she recognized that her life had been forever changed not simply by being noticed, but by the discovery of her own strength and potential. Music had been the key, but the courage to step forward, the dedication to practice, and the willingness to embrace vulnerability had unlocked the door to a new world. She had moved from being ignored to being acknowledged, from invisibility to influence, and from uncertainty to confidence. The journey was ongoing, but she faced it with the knowledge that she could continue to grow, inspire, and make an impact through her passion. And so, she continued, playing her music with heart and intention, sharing her talent with the world, and embracing the opportunities that came her way. Each performance was a celebration of her journey, a reminder that courage, perseverance, and authenticity could transform not only her life but the lives of those around her. The shy girl who had once been invisible had discovered her voice, and with it, she had learned that being seen and appreciated was possible, even for those who had long been overlooked. Her story became one of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of following one's passion.